Right now on Inside Texoma, we're taking a look at the state budget shortfall and how it's really impacting school districts, including the WFISD. Joining me now is WFISD Superintendent Dr. George Kazanis, and we appreciate you being here. And if you can kind of just give us a little sneak peek, I guess, of what we're going to be talking about.
Sure. We're going to talk today about the budget shortfall and its effect on the WFISD. We are looking at a budget shortfall range of anywhere between a $6 million reduction in state revenue to $11.4 million reduction in state revenue. The district has a plan in place for that worst case scenario of 11.4, but we're certainly anxiously awaiting decisions from Austin, what the state budget will be and what the amount of money that will be appropriated to public education will be.
It all starts right now on Inside Texoma. Good morning, Texoma, and thanks for joining us for Inside Texoma. I'm Ashley Fitzwater. This morning, we are taking an inside look at the WFISD and the impact that the Texas state budget shortfall is really having on the school district. We all know that it's affecting numerous areas, including our public schools. And joining me now is Superintendent of the WFISD, Dr. George Kazanis, and we appreciate you being here today. And the budget, of course, is affecting numerous organizations all across the state with $28 billion state shortfall. I know it's having a huge impact on a lot of things, including school districts. And, of course, unfortunately, we are not, excused from that. We are also being hit hard by that. So can you tell me just how this budget and the shortfall is affecting the WFISD?
Sure. Just like, as you mentioned, the state budget has been a projection of around $28 billion. Less in funding, and as you said, it's in a lot of different areas, including health care and services and nursing homes, and of course, we're not immune in public education. We have looked at anywhere a range of cuts to public ed from $6 million to the WFISD, anywhere up to $11.4 million to the WFISD. And these cuts are coming in one particular area, and they're in our state funding. They're in what's called the permanent school. There are foundation dollars, and those foundation dollars are what funds the state revenue to the WFISD. And so that's what our state legislature continues to look at this time. They are trying to compromise and establish a budget for the entire state, and of course, then that would determine what we will receive in the WFISD.
But unfortunately, there's no dollar amount that you're going to lose.
Not at this time. There, of course, how the process works. There's the House and the Senate, and both chambers have passed a budget, but now they're in conference committee, and they have until the end of this week to really iron out some of the differences. There are different versions for the state budget between the House and the Senate, and so we're certainly watching those very carefully to see what that will have an effect on Wichita Falls ISD. But as I said, there is no exact number. It's been very challenging, to say the least, to plan for next year, to plan that to know. We usually can project in the future based on the number of students enrolled in our schools and our projection for next school year. It gives us a good idea what we can project in state revenue as well as our local revenue, and then our final piece is our federal revenue.
But you're looking at having to cut anywhere from 6.2 to 11.4 million.
Yes.
I mean, that is a huge difference that could affect numerous jobs. I mean, just lots of different things. So how do you go about making such a hard decision with such a different amount, a range?
Well, we really began this process, I have to go back probably until January, when the session first began. We certainly had some indications that the state would be short. As you might recall, the state currently in this biennium, overall the state budget is short, and that's what recently some legislation has been passed to spend a little bit of the rainy day fund for this particular biennium. And so having that heads up, we began that process of realizing that there would be the possibility of less dollars to the district. And so we formulated a committee of our staff members, and there were 25 members from all different aspects of the district working in different types of jobs to examine our budget. And we also then solicited through an online survey cost-cutting suggestions from the entire staff. And we took that information and developed it into a recommendation that we could present to the Board of Trustees. And in doing so, we were looking at a lot of areas like support areas, and that would include such areas as maybe our maintenance department, transportation, support areas, warehousing, things like that. We looked at, of course, extracurricular programs, your athletics and fine arts. We certainly looked at student support areas like your counselors, your nurses, librarians, special education services, things of that nature. We, of course, looked at personnel, looking at maybe looking at staffing patterns as well as looking at salaries and benefits. And then we also then looked at our instructional supply budgets and things, curriculum and instruction areas. And so by doing so, we were looking at things that we certainly could do maybe more on a permanent basis. We looked at things that were really what we call deferred, short-term savings that in a year or two we would really need to reconsider that particular area and restore to the budget. And of course, in personnel, in our general fund of our budget, it makes up almost 80% when you take in the salary and the related benefits. And so, unfortunately, we tried as much as we could to stay as far away from that classroom. But when so much of your budget is tied up in people, because we're a service industry, we are a people business, and we provide an education service, and so we are heavily dependent upon our human resources, which is our teachers and staff. And so we do had to look very carefully at our staffing patterns and looking at some positions in the district, and we'll be smaller next year. We will be a smaller personnel for the 2011-12 school year. But in doing so, we were a little over $8 million that we could suggest in savings. We've also looked at some refinancing of some maintenance notes there, and that would be an assistance. But that's not quite the worst case scenario, though. And we needed to be prepared for that, which, as you mentioned, was $11.4 million. And so we did do some even deeper cuts. We're there. We have a plan in place. But we also, though, kind of, in a sense, tentatively have a contingency plan, though, if money is restored to the district. And so, yes, we're waiting very anxiously to the legislature. The time is coming to a close. They finish, as you know, at the end of May. And the state budget certainly does not negotiate without certainly the different interests, and I know they're having a difficult time reaching a compromise. There's lots of indications that we may go into a special session.
So a lot of different things. I know they're trying to make a decision, but their decisions having everybody else kind of waiting. So we're going to continue talking about this and those cuts made to the WFISD. That's coming up after the break here on Inside Texoma. And welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, I'm here with Wichita Falls ISD Superintendent Dr. George Kazanis. He is giving us an inside look at how the state budget shortfall is really impacting the WFISD, and we appreciate you taking the time to explain this to us. I know it's something many hear about, a few minutes on the news, but this has really given us an in-depth look at what has been a pressing issue, I guess, since January is what you've been saying. So something that I know you're taking very seriously and the board has been working hard on. So explaining a little bit more about the 8.2% and the 11.4 million, that has been taken. Can you explain a little bit about breaking that down, what that came to?
Sure. As I said earlier in the program, we informed the committee, and the committee then was broken up into different sub-areas, and they were able then to examine such things as our support systems in place. And a lot of those areas did include possibility of a reduction in staff, but also reductions in supplies or equipment, and either fuel or warehouse supplies, things of that nature, travel budgets. We also looked at our equipment supplies for our extracurricular programs, We certainly are making some reductions in those areas. In our personnel area, we were looking at reducing benefits to staff, looking at additional costs for health care that's provided by the district and having employees contribute more. Some of our cuts include also maybe possibility of pay reductions, like a 1%, 2% to 3% reductions. Those are some specifics. And we also, as you know, in our jobs, maybe have different stipends that are paid for additional work beyond the classroom. We were looking at those levels and maybe possibility of reductions in stipends. Also, though, as I said, we were looking at then each area that out as far away from the classroom as we could that supported education and seeing where we could streamline better, be able to still provide the services. In a lot of the, for example, in my office at the Education Center, the central office others call, we've been proposing a reduction of about 20% in staff there. So a lot of those positions certainly are going to be absorbed in the district through attrition. Those employees that resign or retire each and every year. We have, of course, now what's called surplus list of employees, but we are very confident we do have those positions for them. But a lot of the services that were then provided now then are going to be provided, have to be provided at that campus level instead of maybe provided on a district-wide basis. And so it, again, has made us rethink how we deliver services. We certainly have, as you mentioned, began this in January and have worked methodically through this, have worked through committee process with this, have gotten Board of Trustee input. We did that in March and vetted through the different recommendations in March and the first part of April. And we have an $11.4 million plan at this time. We certainly have not seen indications from Austin that is exactly what we would have to cut. The House, we were going with the initial budget bill passed by the House, which is House Bill 1. There certainly have been a number of amendments since that time. There's certainly been discussion of the use of the rainy day fund, as you know. There's been using other types of revenue, looking at the sales tax revenue, things of that nature, other projections. And so the Senate, on the Senate side, they're looking at some finance formulas that add a little more equity to the system. Wichita Falls has always been at the lower end of that in terms of funding per student versus some of our counterparts in other parts of the state. And so one good thing maybe at the end of the session or end of this time, there will be more equity in the system for public schools. And so our cut may not be as deep maybe as another school district in another part of the state. But that, again, as you mentioned earlier in this program, that exact number is still not known to us. And so we are anticipating a range, as I mentioned, from $6 million to $11.4 million.
Can you talk about the cuts that have been made? We've heard a lot about them. I know if you've been following this, we've heard, some teachers have had to be let go, and I know that, like you said, that was just 80%. It's going to affect personnel. Can you talk about the amounts, though, in kind of each area?
In personnel, particularly with some of the teachers, we have had a program, for example, our pre-kindergarten program, that was funded separate and apart from the foundation school program, as I mentioned to you. That particular grant program that we were able to offer a full-day pre-kindergarten program to our students has been eliminated and will be eliminated. It's not under discussion at this time. And it totaled approximately $865,000 to the district. And that was enabling children. We're only required in pre-kindergarten services to offer half-a-day programs, a 3-hour block of time. But we were able to use the grant and extend that to a full day, and certainly was popular with the students and the families being in schools similar to maybe siblings and things of that nature. But we have had to revamp our program and look at that, and so in doing so, we've had to make plans for half-day programs, and so that just translates into less teachers needed. And so, yes, we did have some reductions in pre-kindergarten teachers. We've had some reductions, what we called right-sizing some of our classrooms and looking at our own formulas here in the district, looking at certainly not the 22-to-1 ratio that the state has from kindergarten to 4th grade, but looking at our 5th grade, 6th grade, and junior highs and high schools, looking at those class sizes. And so we could do that. We certainly have reduced some staff in teachers in that particular area. But all that being said, as I mentioned to you, also the central office in terms of itinerant teachers and administrators being 20% cut there. We're looking at well over $3 million, though, that I could classify as permanent reductions. These are things that will be in place for from here on out for the WFISD, because the legislature is looking at balancing the next biennium's budget. There's been no discussion about how to fund public schools in the future. There's some discussions about, as I mentioned to you, putting more equity into it, but the current system we have in place has been that same system since 2006. And we have been under the same funding formula since 2006. And no, we just have to be prepared for that fact that it does not look like that mechanism is going to change in the next 2-year biennium. And so I also have to be careful of the next 2 years after that. And so we certainly are hopeful in the future that we look at that because, as you know, since 2006, many things have changed in our economy. Many things have changed in pricing. Many things, just like the household at home, your fuel prices, your food prices, your cost of living, things of that nature. So,
kind of just something that we have to go through.
It's something every household is dealing with, and the school district as well. Government agencies and the government sector is probably, in simplified terms, a little bit behind with this economic slowdown than maybe the private sector was, as you know, a couple of years ago. And so it certainly has caught up to us.
Is that hard? I mean, being the superintendent, I know you want the best. You want, to make sure that you can have, everyone keep their same job or their same pay or their same health care and, maybe not even have to look at this. But, how does the superintendent deal with this and the school board and, to continue to stay positive at these things?
It has been an enormous task. It certainly has required lots of communication between my office and myself and the staff, and as well as communication to the community and to the board. That's always a given. We have to continue in that effort to communicate each step along the way. But it isn't, in a sense, an enormous burden to us to take care of our children. The children are first and foremost. And I guess our goal through all this is to make sure that we were still providing and ensuring a top quality education for students. And so, again, it's not just a cliche where we're trying to stay far away from the classroom. It goes beyond the class in that instance. It goes to making sure that we have the programming in place and that we have the facilities in place and that we have all the supplies and things that our students need first. And then the next step back from that then would be staffing it appropriately. And there was a lot of discussion and a lot of determinations of what that appropriate staff would be. And so certainly we feel like we're able to offer that next year. We're very confident in what we're offering our students and confident in the projections of students in our classes. We do have a good idea of what we're anticipating in student enrollment next year. Many of our students already pre-register, for example, for high school classes and looking at what electives they're interested in. And so, yes, we've had a sharp eye at that and making sure that we have a very equitable system across all of our schools. And so, again, as I said, it is, again, looking through our task through a new lens and making sure, taking all assumptions and putting everything on a table and being able then to reevaluate really how we do business.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. We need to take another quick break. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, we are taking an inside look at how the state budget shortfall is really impacting the WFISD. And I know a question I've heard a lot of people talk about is, we've heard about the cuts, we've heard about, all the difficulties of trying to make the balanced budget, but what about hiring? Is that taking place at all within the WFISD?
Sure. The district is now going through its natural attrition process, meaning there are folks that are retiring from their positions or have resigned for whatever reason from their positions. And so we have gone through the process of looking at, through the budget reduction process, through the personnel reduction process, looking at staff members, though, that had a contract with the district called a term contract that were entitled to a job this next school year. So we are looking at filling those vacancies with that set of folks and making sure that it matches, of course, their certification and can go back into the classroom and doing a number of jobs. But in addition to that, though, yes, we have determined there are openings in the district. There are some particular positions that we can post opening for the next school year based on attrition. And so we certainly have encouraged the staff members that were affected by the budget reductions to look at those, to go, they're posted, and to indicate to us as a district that they are interested in remaining employed in the district. And so now we're beginning that process of looking at those. And so we certainly are hopeful, though, through the attrition process that then we'll have a top quality of applicants for those jobs for the WFISD and for the kids.
Absolutely, and that's good news.
Yes,
for
that is good, but it certainly is a challenging job market though for those students that are finishing and graduating this semester. Our suggestion to particular education grads is to be as diversified as you can. Look at your certifications and see if you could qualify and take any additional certifications to diversify yourself as an applicant, maybe in special education or gifted and talented or English as a second language, any of those type of ads that they could have to their general certificate.
Are those jobs posted now, or
Yes.
will there be a date
Those jobs have been posted, as I said, and then any new positions will be posted. We have some generic postings for elementary teachers, for example, and some secondary jobs. We certainly have those. We have some jobs tied to our high schools, and so we certainly are looking at that. And as I said, I have met with those affected by the budget reductions and encouraged them to reapply to the district as well.
And how do people need to go about that? If that's something they're interested in, do they just need to go to the website,
yes.
the WFISD
website?
It's
an online system. It's the WFISD's website at WFISD.net, and then there will be a link on the human resources about how to apply.
Okay. And just kind of going back to wrap up the talk of the budget, you talked a little bit about the deadline, and they're hoping, May 31st that session would end. Like you mentioned, though, they could go into special session. What would be the absolute deadline in your opinion, that they would have to have something done so you would know, okay, this is how much we have, this is what we need to do now before the next school year starts?
Well, our deadline as a school district by law is August the 31st. And so by all indications, certainly a special session would end by that time. Some rumors have been out there, maybe a special session in July, but that poses a huge challenge because this year we've already accelerated that budgeting process, of course, by preparing for $11 million plus shortfall. But we really begin the hard work also now in June and July with budget workshops, meeting with the Board of Trustees, going through with staff, looking at our next year's projections and things of that nature. So by not having that information even in the month of June, it still poses a big challenge to us. There's certainly people that are in a sense waiting to see about the budget revenue for next year. There have been in many areas, as you mentioned already, that I've talked about, as well as in personnel, but we're just not able to make those determinations at this time. We're in a wait-and-see mode right now, but we're certainly hopeful then once we get that information, once the state budget has been approved, that will, of course, increase our workload there and efforts to then propose that budget for the next school year.
So best case scenario would be they do not go into a special session that you know at the end of May, but if they do, then hopefully, I guess, by the summer you would have an answer.
Usually special sessions may be for a couple of weeks. They usually, of course, examine 1 to 2 issues at the most, and certainly school finance or the state budget would be one of the major issues that would be on their plate at that time.
Absolutely. We'll, of course, continue to keep you up to date on News Channel 6 and NewsChannel6Now.com. We're going to take one more break, but stay with us for more Inside Texas. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. We're taking an inside look today with WFISD Superintendent Dr. George Kazanis, giving us an inside look at the budget and how it's really affecting the WFISD. But something else, I know we really wanted to brag on, the graduates. We have graduation coming up, of course, and even the Teacher of the Year. So I know there's a special well wishes you want to say to our graduates, and we want to take this time to really honor them for their hard work.
Sure. We're graduating close to 1,000 students within the next week, of course, at all 4 of our secondary campuses. And we have students going to colleges throughout the nation. We have many students, of course, entering the military and those entering trade schools and technical schools, and, of course, the workforce, too. So we're very, very proud of their accomplishments. For example, even have a student that's going to be starting in the fall at Harvard in the Ivy League school. So we're very, very proud of them. They have earned enormous amounts of scholarship dollars and those continue to come in, and so that not only, of course, are they're well-rounded students, they have that academic background plus the extracurricular background as well, and they're getting into these top-notch colleges with very, very attractive financial packages. So we're certainly very, very proud of them. And then, of course, it takes great parents and to be a part of those students' lives, but also we have great staff members, of course. And recently we've selected our Teacher of the Year, and her name is Joyce McCurdy. She's a 6th grade teacher over at Southern Hills, and she teaches social studies. And, of course, she was nominated because of her teaching abilities, and she's lived around the world and brings that into that social studies, world geography type class. That's part of the 6th grade curriculum. But she also gives so much back to her community. And that's what, of course, many of our staff members do. They're a part of Wichita Falls. They volunteer. They're involved in their civic organizations. They're involved in their church organizations. And Mrs. McCurdy is one of those that mentors young ladies after school and certainly is a role model for them. And so we're certainly very, very proud of her.
Absolutely. Well, again, congratulations to Mrs. McCurdy and all of the graduates. We definitely want to wish them the very best. Thank you so much for being with us today and giving us this inside look. We really appreciate it. And we want to say thanks to you. And as always, we'll see you back here next Sunday morning for another look inside Texoma.